forests, and ancestral lands of our Indigenous peoples. We would like to acknowledge the sacred land on which the Barrie Central Emergency Service Campus operates. It has been the site for human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the ancestral land of the Huron-Wendat and Anishinaabe Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Williams Treaty. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture. We also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land and are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect. Thank you. The agenda for today's meeting was distributed in advance. A motion to approve the agenda. Mr. Kennard, Ms. Starr, any questions, comments, or amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you. Is there any declarations of conflict of interest with respect to the agenda items? Seeing none. Also presented in advance was the minutes of our meeting of May the 19th, 2022. A motion to approve those minutes. Mr. Kennard? Ms. Starr? Any comments, questions, amendments to the minutes as distributed? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. We'll move into our deputation. As we work through, we've been working through already preparing a lot of work done by staff in preparing our 2023 budget. Part of that process is public consultation, and it's critical that as a board we provide the opportunity for those that would like to either in person as a deputation or by way of email or any other source to get the comments from the public as we move forward in finalizing our draft and then presenting late fall our 2023 budget. We do have one deputation here this afternoon with us. It is Mr. Spears. Spears, can I ask you to come forward, please? Just before you start, just a reminder, the deputation serve is to be 5 minutes long, and then upon your completion, we will open it up to the board for any questions that they may have after that. We do thank you, sir. We welcome you to the Barrie Police Services Board. We have had the opportunity to hear from you before, and we look forward to it again. So I'll hand the floor over to you, please, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chief Greenwood, Mayor Lehman. Members of the board, police staff, thank you for welcoming me again to speak with you. Let's talk about the 2023 police budget. I think you know where I stand on policing. Most of you have heard me speak on this issue in the past, so I won't go through everything I've said before. I do hope, though, that you can tell by the fact I keep returning to this podium that I really feel that resource allocation is vital for our city. I do want to reiterate that when it comes to the Barrie Police budget and policing in general, my stance is not soft. Barrie Police budget has become bloated to the point of paying for our community. Tens of millions of dollars sought by the police service each year takes away from funding that other city programs badly need. Programs that are life-affirming, but have been starved for funding for years. Programs that are true tools of not only crime prevention, but also community building. Our economic system is built on the quest for profit. Even its most ardent supporters will agree. Well, police were originally designed to protect this system, to ensure the generation of profit doesn't stop. Police are with us to protect property and institutions. The duty to protect people is arbitrary at best. Police strengthen a system of economic and social brutality for many. They prevent attacks against this system, but they don't do a very good job of preventing crimes against people. True crime prevention starts with properly funded social services and programs. How do we fund these services? By defunding the police. It's the only way. Because reforming the police hasn't worked and will not work. You just have to look at data released by Toronto Police this week, showing that disproportionate police enforcement and use of force against Black people remains a problem, despite reforms. Police are simply unable and ill-equipped to solve modern-day problems and societal issues, both in the short term and the long term. But there is another way. Just the other day, I read an article in the London Free Press about how calls to St. Thomas Police for service in the downtown have dropped by more than 80% since a supportive housing facility opened there. This is what can be done when funding is distributed fairly and equitably. Unfortunately, this kind of forward thinking is not common. Like a lot of cities and towns in Ontario, Barrie deals with crime from a reactionary standpoint. And the default response we go to time and time again is to have the police involved. And usually not only as participants, but acting as the lead organization. I think a good example of this is remarks that Councillor Thompson made at the May 30th General Committee meeting. I don't mean to single you out, Councillor Thompson, for any reason other than clarification. But when discussing a part of your new motion regarding panhandling and drug use, you said that it was legislated for the police to be part of the community safety and well-being plan. I and others I've spoken with believe that this is simply not true. Part 11 of the Police Services Act is clear. It only says that the chief of police or a delegate be on the advisory committee. That's the extent of their legislative role. Frankly, we use legislation as an excuse to not do anything, instead of a call to action to do more. And these kinds of misrepresentations are an all too common example about communities like Barrie support and feed the idea that the police somehow need to play a larger and more substantial role than other organizations in the delivery of public safety. Barrie's community safety and well-being plan is a clear indicator of how much we lean on the police and rely on them. It doesn't have to be that way, though. And I think the community safety and well-being plan, through a well thought out and community-driven revision, would be a good way of starting to remove police from the equation. We have loads of work to do in this city, maybe more than most people realize, and maybe so much that we can't even imagine what better actually is anymore. But as long as our first response to community safety is to look to the police, we are in trouble. But we are allowed to make our community better. I think we lose sight of that sometimes. It's okay to change. It's okay for you to all change. It's okay to look beyond our current institutions and envision a better way. And I think there is a sense of urgency to do this now. We have a far-right candidate vying for mayor. We can soon see a greater reliance on police, increased targeting of residents, bigger police budgets, privatized security forces, and tough crackdowns on some of our most vulnerable neighbors. That anti-panhandling motion floated by Councillor McCann a few weeks ago may just be the starting point. We need change now. We must reimagine public safety in our community now. We must reinvest in the people who call Barrie home now. We must reduce the police budget by at least 10% this year, with subsequent reductions in the following years. We need to take power away from the police and empower programs and people who will make our community better. Before I end, I want to wish Chief Greenwood all the best in her retirement. Thank you for listening to me over the last few years. I know we have our differences, but please know that my best wishes are sincere. And of course, good luck to Mayor Lehman in whatever new political endeavor you may choose to pursue in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Spears, on behalf of the board, thank you very much for taking the time to convey your thoughts for our consideration. I'll open it up to the members or any questions for Mr. Spears.
You know, I don't think I'm going to, I don't want to sort of engage in this debate today, Michael, but at some point before I'm gone, I'm going to ask you with those comments about how police protect capitalism, because that whole piece is a sort of philosophical discussion that probably doesn't belong in a budget discussion, but I'm interested in those remarks. And I want to thank you for coming every year and giving us your views. Obviously, there are views that may differ pretty significantly from a number of us around this table, but I appreciate that you still come in and give these deputations and your ongoing commitment to it.
Yeah, I'd love to have that discussion.
Yeah.
I'll with you over some things going on.
Howard, please.
Thanks, Chair. And similar to Mayor Lehman's, Mr. Spears, first of all, thank you for your deputation. I also appreciate the tone and the demeanor that you bring, because you do come with some differing views as stated by the mayor. I won't speak for everyone, obviously. I am curious of your thought that you put into it and the research that you put into it. I might use two terms that you may disagree with, and that's fine. Generalizations, for example, that might be Ontario-wide, nationwide, internationally, et cetera, versus some localized data what opportunity have you had to engage with some of the social service providers that you speak of, who you believe need some further funding and empowerment?
Well, as much as a citizen can, like I'm pretty active. I try to be as active with different causes as I possibly can, but I'm not privy to certain things. I'm not in the room when decisions are made and when organizations are talking about funding. So I can't really get into it, to the specifics of that, but I will just say that I'm not alone when I stand up here making these calls. I may be one specific voice, but I think we saw in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, we saw the community rally around it, and so we know that there's calls for change. We know that. I think everyone in this room would realize that our services and our programs that the city can offer, whether it's job training, affordable housing, healthcare, addiction services, things like that, they need more money. I think everyone can agree with that. And where do we find that money? Well, the police budget takes up a huge chunk of it, and we could start by taking some of that and doing some real upstream work on that issue. I might be standing up here, I might be the only one here as a deputy, but I'm not alone. This is, I'm not saying I'm courageous than other people, but it's not an easy thing to do to stand up here in front of the chief of police and say what I say. And so there's lots of people that are kind of with me and agree with me on a lot of these things. They may not be here today, but they're definitely out there, and we saw it in 2020, and I think if we don't make a change pretty soon, I think we'll start to hear them get louder and louder.
Well, I'll repeat my comment. I appreciate your demeanor and regurgitate the mayor's comment. Appreciate your commitment to it. My only other thought is I welcome you, if you haven't already had the opportunity to, over the last year or two or three that you've been coming here, I've only been here for a couple, seeing where the police service as itself and its mandate and its strategic plan has engaged with social service providers and see the change in the evolution of the service internally, as well as the relationship between some of those service providers. I'm just curious if you've had the opportunity, and if not, I encourage you to look into that.
Yeah, I haven't, mainly because, my thoughts on the police, you call them generalizations, but they're pretty philosophically sound in terms of my belief. So regardless of what I saw, it's the foundation of the place. It's the fact that they're rooted in colonialism, keeping racial minorities down, keeping poor people down. That's where they started. So in order to move forward as a community, as a province, a country, we need to totally reevaluate the way we do things. Start from scratch. To have the community come together to form some kind of new system that's of community safety and support in our city. We need to do that.
Look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Just a quick comment. Thank you again for your invitation. I think the one different point you make is I don't think there's anybody in this room that actually disagrees with a lot of what you say. I think everybody in this room would like to see every service you mentioned funded at the appropriate amount. I think the flaw is you think that it's a municipal budget that would fund them, where everything you mentioned is provincially funded. And I find that the deputation here or the defund the police is an easy target. Where as a councillor, a lot of my calls from residents are safer neighborhoods, safer streets, more police presence. And I think if we could get proper funding from our other levels of government, which we've seen downloaded and failed drastically, I think the need for policing budgets where call volumes would go down because of the social programs being funded appropriate would actually help society as a whole. But as Mayor Lehman said, I would love to have a conversation because I think we're on way different sides of what you think that policing is based on and stuff. And I think just in the 3 years that I've watched you come and made deputations, I think this force has actually move leaps and bounds to a better community-driven approach. So, like I said, I think your concern for those social services are felt around this table and on council's table. I just think that, you know, if I called a resident and said, we would defund the police by 10%, they probably want their money back in their jeans, opposed to funneling it or funding something that isn't our municipal mandate. And that's the thing. And I think that if the approach was to look at proper funded social programs by the levels of government and stop downloading on the municipality, I don't think you'd have an argument with anybody in this room to help you succeed with them. So
Yeah, and I
thank
totally agree with you on a lot of those points. Obviously, I think there's like a couple of things. So, you know, with defunding the police by 10%, like that jumps out of a lot of people. People say, well, we can't do that. Crime would go up. You know, there's no proof that crime would go up. But people say we can't do that. We need to think of more. We need to have a plan in place before we actually before we do anything. I always look at what's happened during COVID, especially in the justice sector. There's a lot of things that happen in the justice sector that everyone said could never be done. But COVID forced change to happen. I think that needs to be the mindset when it comes to the police. And in terms of where we get our funding from, you know, I'd love to see council take a more proactive role in having discussions with the province and the federal government in terms of changing the municipal act, so that municipalities can have a greater role in actually being able to have more resources and to a bit more tax freedom, so that they could actually get this revenue and fund these programs. So until that happens, you know, taking a few $1 million from the police to help some of our most vulnerable neighbors who get to today, I think that's where we need to go.
Thanks again.
Once again, Spears, thanks very much for your taking the time to speak to us. You're certainly welcome to stay. It is an open meeting. You're welcome to stay. Again, thanks very much on behalf of the board.
Thank you.
Chief Greenwood, most of us, the board, know something up, but maybe those joining us online may not, to talk about our award winner annual report.
Our annual report, here we go. There's, what is that? What is that?
That's the door.
Oh,
I want to
it's security.
remove the beeper on that.
It's the Ring doorbell.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. The next item on the agenda is our 2021 annual report, and I will introduce Inspector Burke, who will introduce members of his great team.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks, Chief, and the rest of the board members. So you won't be surprised. I'll open with my usual salvo. I take no credit for anything that you're going to see because it's the people in our strategic planning office and our corporate comms office that put this together. We did present last year our annual report. Subsequent to that, we actually received two media awards for that report. We feel that we built on the product that we had last year, and we've stepped it up another level, so we're hoping to achieve at least the same or more this year. So without further ado, I'll bring up Staff Sergeant Linda Morehouse. She was assisted certainly throughout the process by Dana Stott, Victoria Tulowitz out of our business planning, our strat planning office, and Jeanette Hayes out of our corporate comms is another big source of input for this. So without further ado, I'll bring up Staff Sergeant.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. See you. So thank you for the opportunity to share the 2021 annual report with you all. The presentation this time is going to be a video that best illustrates the enhanced online document and how to navigate through the interactive images, videos, and articles. Another improvement to this year's annual report is the ability to scroll through sections rather than one continuous document. This will provide us with more specific data collection relating to page views and average time spent on sections. And that information will provide insight into what the viewers find interesting and more engaging. Our team will be available for questions following the video. So what we were really trying to accomplish with this, you'll probably see that it's part of that collection that we've created with the previous annual reports and the strategic plan. So it looks similar in design, but we also wanted to make it very clean, very clear, very focused, and encourage a lot of online exploration from people with the added videos and the interactive portions of it.
Yeah, I guess with that, we try to demonstrate, we try to make it the navigation much more easier. So when we do have people visiting the website and they do click on the annual report, it's actually easier to navigate, which may then cause people to start, oh, I can expand this picture, I got a video here, I can click there. So we can track all that data. That's the other thing, that's the other great advantage that we have, is tracking the visits, seeing where they go, seeing what the visitors are interested in, and then we can expand on that even further. So we've certainly put some video content in there of members across the service, both civilian and sworn. You see now also from the board, you can go in and choose if people are interested in linking to a board meeting. We have that access there too. So it's really about expanding the platform and improving the access for it. So we'll open it up for any questions that any member of the team can answer for you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just simply sum it up pretty quickly. Congratulations on using best practices in marketing and deliberative content, because first of all, analytics and aggregation of data will help you with the next one. Ease of use and user experience will increase engagement and time on page, and infotaining approach or edutainment approach will also encourage someone staying on farther, longer and getting better educated. So home run as far as I'm concerned. Congratulations. Thank you.
Yeah, a quick question. I mean, the quality of the document's incredible, both online and the layout, the content itself. It's really an amazing piece of work. The analytics from the last couple of years, have we looked at who's reading it? We have a sense of what the audience is for this?
Yeah, we were able to collect some analytics from it, but because last year's document was one complete roll down, you couldn't branch out into specific sections, so we couldn't figure out who was going where specifically. This will make it much easier to do that. I don't know if we were able to dial down specifically to where the users came from, just the number of users and viewers.
That's correct. You can track what platform they come from.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, social media and so forth, but it's really trying to gauge what sections of the persons where are they trying to, what are you trying to learn about, how can you further build on that opportunity to offer more information.
But in terms of being able to drill down to who specifically is looking.
No, I wasn't expecting, name and address. Dan, knock on the door.
We just want to reiterate.
We noted you downloaded our report. We have a few questions. Let's see how that goes. No, my thought actually was, first of all, whether we've had much feedback on the document externally or actually internally, but with the analytics, actually, I think Victoria hit my point, which is the city's website learns to the extent that, the pages and the subject matter that gets searched most frequently, the internal algorithm for the page promotes it so that people find it even more. And in theory, you end up in a kind of virtuous circle where people start finding what they're looking for more easily and therefore access it more, which I could see being really powerful for the service, especially when it comes to like promoting online reporting and things like that. So great to see the functionality. But I guess the question I had in that was, do we get any feedback on the document externally? We love it.
Yeah, I mean, we do get some comments. Yep.
Yeah, I can say it's part of our communication plan. We do both physical copies if other services send us theirs or they request it. But generally, most of our external stakeholders have asked for virtual copies at this time.
Sure.
So we have all of our different stakeholders within the community, social services, the paramedics, the county, all of those, of course, the city as well. And we send it out, and generally the feedback is always very positive about both the design and the information we have. Some of the things that we've heard in the past are, depending on the stakeholder, they have a different area of already knowledge of policing. So one of the things that we've done based on feedback was some people didn't know what the unit really does. What's operational support versus operational services, which is why we decided to try to make it more user-friendly with a standard, with a section that introduces each section to say a little bit about what it actually does. And then it expands on the stats versus just giving the stats. So there's a little bit of context and story to it, so that no matter if it's a stakeholder that is aware of policing versus someone who could just be a general resident of the city of Barrie, everyone is coming and able to understand it from the same perspective.
provides them with.
Right,
more
good
information
point.
about
Yeah.
Sure.
service.
And we know that students access or ask questions in regards to the annual report.
Like police foundations.
Yes,
students and-
they're part of it, and when we speak to our stakeholders and our other partners in policing, they use our annual report for the work that they're doing also.
Great stuff. Thanks,
Any
Mr.
questions?
Well, on behalf of the board, thanks again for, well, first of all, congratulations once again for your award for 2020. I wasn't aware of that until last week, so congratulations on that. I know a lot of hard work's gone into it. And it is, it's simply the best that I've seen in terms of the annual report. So well done. Congratulations for your job. Well done. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Chief, is Mr. Brown going to speak with respect to number 8?
That's correct. If everybody turns to number 8 in their agenda, there is correspondence that the board has been requested to respond to council. And Mr. Brown will give a brief overview of the content of the letter. And if the board have any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Chair Ferguson, member of the board, on August 9th, 2021, Barrie City Council passed a resolution of the Director of Human Resources and the Barrie Police Services to request to provide a memorandum of council by the second quarter of 2022 that include initiatives to increase applications that identify as members of the Indigenous community. We were made aware of this by city staff, NHR, and working towards the following letter that we asked Chair Ferguson to sign and forward to council. Of course, the Barrie Police Service subscribes to the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police Constable Selection System, otherwise known as CCSS, my apologies. And that's a partnership between most, but not all. It is certainly the vast majority of Ontario Police Services and the OACP. As the voice of Ontario's police leaders, the OACP is comprised of policing leaders and executives in Ontario and represents federal, provincial, municipal, and First Nations policing services across the province. Over the last several years, the constable selection system has undergone significant changes to address the issue of people in marginalized communities being able to make application to be a police officer within the province of Ontario. We have been part of that system and continue to be to this day. This letter outlines the changes that that constable selection system has undergone via the OACP, how they impact our service here, how that is assisting us in attracting additional applications from those communities, including the Indigenous community.
Questions for Mr. Bell? Ms. Stone, please.
Maybe for Mr. Brown, maybe for the chief. When we had our strategic planning meeting and we had a representative from the Barrie Native Friendship Center there, and we learned a lot about that partnership. And I believe that we spoke there of like enhancements to that partnership and recruitment efforts and different things like that. And we've talked at this table in the past about Georgian College and their Indigenous program and how we can connect better with them. I don't see any of that in the letter, but I think there are a lot of great things that we're doing in the community to build our relationship with the Indigenous community locally. I don't know if that's going to result in people determining that they want to become a police officer or not, but it certainly is opening the door. And I just wonder if we should express that to council and the community as part of this letter, just some of those initiatives and partnerships that are underway that, I think that just foster good community relations and maybe will lead to somebody having an interest in a career in police services. And the other thing I was thinking, and I don't know, I think the application for members from the Indigenous community, I don't know, if that just relates to sworn members or if it also relates to civilian members, and I don't know if we've addressed that in the letter either.
So it does relate to both sworn members and special constables who are civilian members. That's where the bulk of our hiring and the bulk of our applications are found.
Okay.
There is a selection system for special constables via the OACP, which is talked about in the letter here. In addition to the partnership that you refer to, we also are working on a partnership with the Indigenous Policing Bureau, whose contacts that Deputy Allen has there. But we're not to the point where we might formally discuss that arrangement because it's still in the process.
Yeah. Well, and we just had a visiting chief from an Indigenous service. Like we have a, I'm just going to say we are doing and I think we're being progressive in trying to build our relationship with the Indigenous community and support Indigenous policing. And I think this letter is wonderful and it certainly speaks to the motion, but I'm just wondering if we can maybe add to it to highlight a little bit more of the work that we are doing
In that community engagement piece, and
Yeah.
we could add something in the letter. I'm not sure if that's what council was seeking, but we can talk about the partnership and, you know, when we look at the work that we did with our systemic review, that we have an equity, diversity and inclusion committee that really focuses on education and awareness for our members for multiple communities, but specifically for our Indigenous community, and then
Even the
opportunities.
red dress ceremony
Exactly.
with the elders that we had, and then just recently, the display that we put up for Red Dress Day, like, I know this is specifically what council asked for, but I also think it's a great opportunity for us to say, look at the things that we're doing, like just to highlight for council and the community, because we do talk about how we want to educate the public more about the things that we're up to, and these are good news stories, and maybe we just slide them into the letter.
Chief Greenwood, there was one point I was gonna bring up, but after, I know we're doing these other things, and they weren't, I didn't see them in the letter, and I just saw that we're not letting council know enough about what we are doing, and what we're trying to do, so, but you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly agree with Ms. Strawn's comments. The way I read the letter is that there might have been a more specific or particular ask, that's a new word, particular ask of council on a specific subject matter, and the response is rather aligned with the priority that the board has shared with the service as make every effort to ensure that recruiting is reflective of the community as a whole. So I think it's an appropriate response in the sense that it's not targeted in nature to a specific portion of the community. It is a global or a holistic approach that the service is doing so, which I think is appropriate. And because there's a specific ask from council, I think there's opportunity, as the chief and Ms. Strawn alluded to further elaborate on some items.
The fostering of relationship and the joint projects that we're working on and the initiatives, and we'll include those in it because there's been significant work done from all members throughout the organization.
Any other questions on the letter? We'll just additions to do in terms of very specific, because the motion from council is very specific. It says Indigenous community. It doesn't marginalize per se. It is very specific.
And I think that direction went to all departments within the city of Barrie, not just the Barrie Police Service.
Any other questions for Mr. Bauer? Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Appreciate your time. There were two items in the consent agenda sent out in advance. First of all, motion to receive. Is there any questions, comments, or anybody would like any of the items pulled for the two consent agenda items being staff and knowledge and public? Seeing none, those
very much for just setting up the PowerPoint presentation. And it is always a pleasure to present an overview of what has taken place within the city of Barrie, within the Barrie Police Service since the last time the board met. And here you can see a photograph on our title page, and it is the center stage of the Barrie Police Annual Award Ceremony, which took place on June the 8th. And I can say that with a hiatus of 3 years, it was wonderful to bring members of our service together in a packed house with all of our awards recipients, distinguished guests, our families and our friends were able to participate. And some of the awards that were bestowed upon individuals were our police officers' exemplary service medals, our civilian service pin, life-saving awards, our formal commendation, and chief of police awards. The evening is always inspirational, and we recognize some extraordinary work for members or by members of the Barrie Police Service, our local organizations, and the community as a whole. And once again, I just like to offer congratulations to all of the awards recipients. The next slide, this is a common slide that members of the board will see and members of the community see it. It's a quick snapshot on the calls for service that were generated through our computed automated dispatch. And this information is provided to illustrate what our 20 most frequent calls for service are received in the month. And I can say that we were slightly higher from last month to the month of May. So we had just over 6,100 occurrences generated through the system. And the previous year, we had 5,800 calls for service. So we can see as we gradually climb out of our pandemic response, we're seeing an increase in calls for service. But I can't say that we've identified any specific trends or do we have to make some changes in our response model at this time? I know we are addressing our deployment model and follow through on multiple things within our organization. And I think one of the areas that the community have been concerned with and members of the board and also within our service is the calls involving mental health crisis. And I could say that if I would say, and I don't want to indicate that there's a specific trend, but I think we are going to an area that we're consistent in previous years, not the spike that we saw last year in regards to mental health calls, but we know that there are individuals that are in crisis, and we have service providers that we work with in our response to the CROS program, and working with our partners in mental health, we're able to respond to those type of calls. Always we do provide an overview of some of the highlights of our investigation, and there were 3 serious investigations that occurred over the last month. And if you recall back to May the 30th, our officers were alerted to a male who was in possession of a firearm. The male was located after a short foot chase, and our members were able to arrest him. When we conducted a search of the male in his satchel, he was carrying a loaded 9mm handgun. Also in his satchel was cocaine, fentanyl, and other drugs that are displayed in this this slide. He was charged with 11 criminal offenses in relation to the possession of the firearm and the drugs, and he was also charged with purposes for trafficking and failed to comply with previous court-related release orders. The second investigation began just after 6 p.m. on June the 17th, after Barrie Police responded to a carjacking and a shooting in a residential area. The investigation revealed that a victim was approached by a male who was armed with a firearm who wanted to steal his vehicle, and we have seen that trend in other communities. The victim was quickly reversed out of his driveway, at which time he was shot by the male and suffered serious but fortunately non-life-threatening injuries. The suspect fled from the area in a motor vehicle and was stopped by police just south of our geographic boundaries in Innisfil Beach Road area. 2 suspects were arrested, a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old. The suspects were facing a total of 22 criminal charges, including robbery, firearms, and various assault-related charges, not just this incident, but other incidents that were happening in the broader community. The last investigation that I will speak to is a joint trafficking investigation in partnership with the Ontario Provincial Police. This project commenced just in April in response to fatal and non-fatal overdoses linked to trafficking of crack cocaine and fentanyl in Simcoe County. As a result of the investigation, 11 search warrants were executed on June the 8th at locations in Barrie, Springwater, and also in the Greater Toronto area. And during those searches, search warrants, we located fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and other controlled substances, currency, firearms, ammunition, vehicles, and phones that were all included in a long list of seized items. As a result of this, we had 11 individuals are facing over 100 criminal and drug-related charges. And if you require, those that are joining us remotely, if you wish further information, you could go to the Barrie Police Service website and the OPP. That'll highlight further details in regards to that. Just a few things that I'd like to highlight, and if you look on your desk, members of the board will have a postcard here. In partnership with Simon Fraser University, the Barrie Police Service has launched a survey on the visibility and public perception of our vehicles and the uniforms that our members wear. The survey is designed to gather input on the visibility of our frontline vehicles while traveling through our city and the perception of our officers when using different uniform elements. So I'd like to encourage everybody listening today and members of the board and the public that's present to complete the survey, as it will close on June the 26th. And the link also can be found on our website, Twitter, and Facebook. Also, if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, it is our new Citizens on Patrol traffic speed survey initiative. And our Citizens on Patrol volunteers are being deployed to various areas within our our community, our city, to survey speeds and monitor of noisy vehicles. So traffic and pedestrian safety, as you all know, is a priority for our service, and the data collection during this initiative will be used strategically to deploy our traffic enforcement resources. June has been a busy month for our award ceremony. In addition to our Barrie Police Service awards, I, along with members of our service, had the opportunity to attend the OWL Awards, which is the Ontario Women in Law Enforcement. There's an annual gala event that has been put on hold, but it was hosted on June the 9th, and 10 members of our service were able to attend that evening of celebration. And then on the right side, just this week, during the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police annual conference, our very own Deputy Chief Johnston was presented with the OACP Excellence in Leadership Award for his continued dedication to our evidence-based policing and his work involving the use of crime severity scores and high harm indexing for the deployment of our frontline resources. So congratulations once again, Deputy.
You need that.
And then if you go to the next slide, I must say it is with great enjoyment that we are able to engage with our community on many things as we open up as a city and in our community. And we have the ability to be engaged in very positive things this month. So in June, we were part of recognizing Indigenous History Month and where we honored the history, the heritage, the resiliency, and the diversity within our First Nations, our Inuit, and Métis communities. And on June the 29th, our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee offered a Lunch and Learn session with one of our Indigenous elders in our community. And Elder Ernestine will be sharing, we will be sharing significant meaning behind the medicine wheel. And if you look on the right-hand side here, you can see that we also participated in the Pride Month event, specifically around the Pride Parade, which was on June the 11th. And we had our float, and it was a wonderful event engaging with our community. And our final slide here illustrates our auxiliary officers involved with the Rodeo Club of Barrie in the annual fun run. And once again, we've seen some absences, and now we're back. And these communities are in full swing, and it's an opportunity for members of our community to work with our auxiliaries and all the great things that they do as volunteers, helping our community stay safe. So that's a very quick overview of what we've done in the last month, along with our regular operational work. So thank you.
Well, the day job, thank you.
Yes, exactly.
Mayor Lehman, I'll give you the first opportunity. Any questions or comments?
I appreciate that. Yeah, as I've got a jet. No, I thought it was an excellent update. I think the trends in some of the what we would call the abnormalities during COVID, both the much lower numbers on certain types of crime that are creeping back up, but also it was good to see, I mean, what a difference this May versus last May on mental health. I hope that's reflective of our broader population. So, thanks for the update, Chief.
Any questions or comments?
I've got a question. On the calls for service, I know we have a category for mental health, and that it's like specifically mental health crisis, I suppose, more or less, or that's what I'm looking for some clarification on, because I'm wondering if things like calls for community service or suspicious persons, like to me, those seem like they might be mental health related. And so
Accurately, that's common. Some of the calls for service may come in as a suspicious person, an unwanted person, or even some of our family disputes or domestic incidences. There may be an element of mental health challenges for individuals. So when we categorize something as mental health, it has come in and been cleared as a mental health call. Whether it comes in a different form, we have partnerships in the community where we seek out and look to ensure those that are suffering some type of crisis, whether they're apprehended under the Mental Health Act and transported to our hospital to be assessed, or if it isn't elevated to that area, we are reaching out to other services to ensure that they get the help that they need. And we work with our collaboration team, like Collaborate Barrie too. If someone is at an elevated risk, we work with the multiple agencies to ensure that they get the services that they need at that time.
And I'm thinking about like our evidence-based policing, reporting on the data, and how our data can help to drive the way that we deliver service, but also how we do collaborate with other organizations. And when we're talking about funding, for example, like if we're showing our mental health calls are down, but really there's lots of mental health in these other areas of call. Like, is there some way we can identify that and even to share that information with our community partners so that we have access to funding for mental health related services, like particularly for the community organizations that we are referring these clients to. But if we're saying mental health is coming down in our calls, anyways, I'm just trying to think of like, how do we best collect the data so that we can make the most out of it?
And we are always challenged with the data, and we are trying to decipher that data so we can actually clearly report on some of those other where mental health is part of a call, but we're still challenged by that, and we're working with the data that we have and the Optic who helps us with our data, and a lot of the work that we do is proactive too now, so there may be some way to capture that information a little bit more effectively.
So Chief, if I can just add to that, going back to some of the presentations you've seen by me, Chair and board members of the board, we're also restricted in some degree when we're reporting this information by our obligation to Statistics Canada. So we have to codify the most, all the things that we do in the most appropriate area. So I think what you're looking for is, maybe there's a mental health element to something else that would tie in. And that would be an interesting project to start, but it's not something that we can readily do immediately, but I understand why.
Yeah, like almost as a subset, like we had a domestic dispute, but mental health is an issue, or we had a suspicious person, but oh, yes. Yeah, and that's exactly what you're saying.
It'd be like having two separate looks at it.
Yeah, like how you have to classify it, and then like a sub classification potentially.
I do have a question, just more from a community perspective. As you're referring to, there are members of the public who may be watching. I noticed something unusual for me. I don't know that it's unusual in general, but there has been of late some use of the local community social media groups for people to reach out seeking help for a variety of reasons. One of them was more recently was a call for mental health assistance. Somebody who appeared to be admitting openly that they were in crisis, feeling uncomfortable, feeling like they were approaching a level of crisis. And some of the feedback that came, dial this number, try this organization, et cetera. Of course, the one at RVH, for example, is only open from 8 to 5 or something like that. When you're in crisis at 7:59, what do you do? So curious, is 911 equipped and appropriate, so to speak, to handle calls like that when someone feels like they are in crisis, so that the call taker can assist with maybe deploying the appropriate resources to someone who is potentially facing self-harm or whatever? Like, how do you respond to that? How do we educate the public in terms of how to best use 911 or not use 911?
So we do periodically through our corporate communications do a little bit of education on what 911 is utilized for. And if somebody is in distress, whether they're the individual that is in mental distress or members of families or the community at large believes that someone is in distress, 911 is commonly used, and we may be the first responders along with, for example, paramedic services in our community, and we will ensure that they get the services that they need. So it is a service that is available, and people do respond utilizing 911. So it's helpful when we have 211 that's also out there. We have other organizations that are available, but we are available 24/7, and that's why people use 911, and we respond to those type of calls, and we support individuals that are in crisis, but we ensure that they're not being criminalized as a result of their behavior in medical distress.
Thank you. Sounds like a wellness check.
Yeah, and we do that. We do that, but there are other organizations that are available to that and should be responding to those calls too. And if they are available, then we have the appropriate services responding to that type of call.
Thanks, Chief.
Anything else, Chief? Thanks, Chief, for your update. And today, I did have the opportunity with Barrie and Mr. Khan for the awards night. It was a great evening, and subsequent Deputy Johnson, your excellence in leadership award, congratulations on behalf of the board for that as well. So well done. Our next scheduled regular board meeting is September 15th. Motion to adjourn. Yes. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to your feedback, as I mentioned, and we can improve how we do things. Just welcome your comments. So thanks for joining us.
All right.